Hello, everybody. A lovely night for some hockey. What the fuck is happening? 8 straight losses, and it was an absolute embarrassment. If you are here for level-headed analysis of a blowout, embarrassing 9-3 loss to the god-awful Montreal Canadiens, the second loss you've taken to this team in the midst of having the playoffs, right there. Don't play like dog shit. Just don't play like dog shit for a few games. You make the playoffs, or you have a very good chance. This team continues to vomit all over themselves, and it is now effectively over. If you had hopes of the playoffs, if you had hopes of the Press Row show going to the playoffs like I know we did, it's all over, folks. Buenas noches. And this is such a bad loss that we decided we're not waiting until the morning to do the morning after. It's been a month, technically, since we've done a morning after. It's our 61st game that we have done a post-game show of some sort this year. I saw people clamoring, by the way, on Twitter earlier that we do more. Maybe we do 82 next year. But anyway, I digress. Gentlemen, 9-3 loss, Montreal. Is there anything positive to take away? I'm going to start with the guy who has probably been through some bad losses in his career, but I don't know how he's going to feel about this one. Bundy, on Twitter at Therien6. How you doing, you beaut?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like Andrew Fawcett. It's just fucking embarrassed right now. Like, I mean, I didn't expect that tonight. And, you know, I shouldn't say I didn't expect it. I thought the Flyers would be better, but the way that they just were so defeated in that moment, like when the second goal happened and then the wheels just came right off. And it's almost like they were waiting for that to happen. It felt like it was coming for a while. And it was just really disappointing. You know, you could blame the goalies and people will, but there's a complete disconnect now, you know, with what's gone on in the ice. And there might be fatigue. You know, I understand that teams are tired this time of year, but these kind of losses are not acceptable losses. You know, 6-2 to Columbus and really an 8-1 game. I mean, you know, Montreal started playing an all-star type of game in the third period with a few minutes left, and the Flyers capitalized. But just really just a fucking horrible 12 days, man. Like, I mean, you can't get any fucking worse than this. I'm pissed off. I'm deflated. I'm defeated. And it's really bad. Anthony, I don't know what those fingers are, but...
That's 3. I don't know if you have to do it 3 times.
I didn't want to... Oh, okay, hold on. That was 1.
Just brutal. Like, even my fucking thing isn't even working properly either. It's freezing up on...
You know what? It's so bad right now that I'm actually going to crack out something I've only brought out, I think, twice this year, guys. I'm gonna bring this one out for Bundy. That in case you didn't notice, that was the Flyers season going up in flames.
Yeah.
So Bundy's upset. I want to go to Mr. Positivity, the guy who a few days ago we did a show. And he was saying, "Hey, you know what? Like things are okay. These are the things that you need to see."
I don't know if I ever said things were okay.
And you're pretty fucking positive, buddy. And it was like, positive. Oh, you know, this is good because you have to, you figure out what guys belong, what guys don't belong, all that. And yes, there's a year for it to happen. It's this year in the rebuild, blah blah bullshit. Okay, can you tell me? Be honest. Don't toe the line. I know journalistic integrity. Blah blah blah. Tell me that there's something good to take away from 9-3.
There's nothing.
Where is the coaching point? Where is the learning point? What good can we do? We say like the entire team is worth firing into the sun? Like what exactly? What is the coaching point or the good thing that anyone can take away from this loss?
No, there is zero good that you could take away from a 9-3 loss. So if we want to just look at this game, and let's be honest, I'll raise my hand and I'll tell you I turned it the frick off. Like, I couldn't sit there and watch this nonsense tonight. It was so bad in the second period. I was like, all right, that's it. We're done. Like, this is over, you know? And I flipped to another game that was not all that exciting, and that's the baseball team who's losing right now, too. They can't score. We're not doing that. But anyway, point being is that, like, I bailed on it, right? I mean, who wants to sit through that kind like, that's some masochistic shit if you want to sit through it, right? so no, the game, there's nothing good to take from this game. Nothing. It was terrible. Everything about it. And you could start at the top of the food chain to the last guy in the lineup, and you could find something negative to say about everybody that was involved in this game. If you identify just this game, yes, 1,000%. 1,000% it's terrible. What I was saying the other day, and I don't think this changes that, is that finding out what you have on players that are on this team right now to see if, in fact, they can be part of what you want to be in the future, that is a good thing. And even if you're losing games, you are learning about them and realizing who you don't want to be part of it. And to me, that is a positive in a rebuild, which this has been all along. Okay? It has been that all along. You can make the playoffs in a rebuild. You might miss the playoffs in a rebuild, but that's all part of it. That's all I was saying the other day. There's zero positivity to take from this. And you want to break down the fact that the goalies are terrible, that's fine. You want to look at Jamie Drysdale and Nick Sealer. I don't even know what they finished. Sealer was
Drysdale, I think it was
minus 6 and
-6.
-5.
-6 and -5 is what they finished. Yeah, I mean that's terrible. That's just terrible. And I know plus minus is not the be all end all, but if you're on the ice for that many friggin' goals, I mean that's something wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Just something wrong. And I don't know what happened to this team's structure. They played really good structure for much of this season, and it just disappeared in the last 8 games. Not even 8. I would say last 6 games, right? Because, you know, the end of that stretch against the really good teams, they were still kind of in games. They were kind of hanging around. It was once you hit the first Montreal game, and ever since then, it's kind of like the structure just disappeared. It went away. And so, like, to me, that's a concern. That's something you want to look at and say, why? Why did that fail? You know, maybe do some like hard-hitting analysis of that. But really, when you look at it from the grand scheme and the grand perspective, this is all part of what this end of season has been. You're learning a lot about this team. And yes, you're still as far away as we all thought they were back in beginning of October. It's what it turns out to be. They gave us 65 games of, oh, maybe this team's better than we thought they were. We heard it in the commercials. Elliot Friedman saying, I was wrong about Philadelphia, right? We heard how many times we hear that commercial when they're selling tickets. Well, guess what, Elliot? Maybe you weren't wrong about Philadelphia. Maybe Philadelphia is exactly what you thought they were. They just kind of surprised people for, 2/3 of the season. But the last third of the season, they were what you thought they were. And that's all there is to it.
The only good thing that I can take away from this, I'm going to try to be positive here for a second. I know. Leave it to me to be the positive guy on the show. Okay?
Yes.
There are 3 games remaining. The 10-game losing streak that has become part of the Flyers' fabric, it's still in play. But more so, you get to 11 games. Now, I do want to take people really quick. Now that they've lost 8 straight games, the Flyers are they have the 12th worst record in the league. And it is entirely possible that they could fall even further. Holy shit. They could finish with a top 10 pick in the draft. Their incompetence, their inability to field an even remotely competitive team in these last 8 games and then the 3 yet to come, there is an outside chance that Seattle, who has 3 games in hand, Seattle could theoretically jump over the Flyers, and so too could Buffalo. So there's a little bit of positivity. Now, I said this the other day. I went macro, and I said, all right, if you told everybody at the beginning of the year, you're going to have to trade away your top stateside prospect because you don't want to play here. Maybe it's because you don't want to play for the coach. The goalie has to go turn himself into the authorities because of the Hockey Canada scandal. You trade a guy that was a throwaway for a first-round pick. You refuse to move Scott Lawton twice for a high pick. You extend Nick Sealer, and you end up missing the playoffs just barely, and you're in the middle of the first round. That sucks because that is a Fletcherian outcome. That's actually a Hextallian outcome. And you could shake your head all you want, and I love you to death, but your unwillingness to look at this and say that it was sold as a rebuild. It's great that they went on a nice run. It's great that they were in contention. If this losing streak happens before the deadline, do they go into the deadline the same way? Do they only make one move of a roster player? No, not out of playoff contention. If they had an 8-game losing streak at some point before the deadline, where they were like,
but they were still in a playoff spot at the deadline.
well, I mean, tangent, like the way that they're kind of in a playoff spot right now. We're like, they're
were
battling
in a
among
big
5 or
time
6 teams.
playoff spot there.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if they were one of the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference, regardless of when the losing streak occurred, if they were one of the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference at the deadline would not have been any different.
No, but I'm saying if they were one of like 5 teams that looked like they might be kind of in striking distance. What I'm saying is they had these moments where they put so many things together, and it was like the perfect storm of getting all of your wins in a much more compact time frame.
If I'll say this, let me just, I don't know if this is what you're trying to say. If the team is in this position, right, at the trade deadline, Scott Laughton is not here. He's gone. 100% he's gone. I don't know what you're doing with Sealer. I'm not necessarily sure. They had to make a trade deadline decision, sign or trade. And then they, the one thing that really did, this is the one part where it's odd, because I do think they made the right move, because you didn't know if you're going to get him back, because someone's going to pay him crazy money. But the Walker move absolutely hurt this team. Risto, ultimately at the end of the day, Sealer was out for some time, and he's not been the same player since he's come back. But there are guys that absolutely I don't think would be here. I don't think that Eric. I don't know if that
Eric
same
Johnson's
trade
not here.
in Colorado. He may not have been here if the trade if it made it, things may have just looked differently. So again, but what are you supposed to do? Like the Flyers were talking, Briere was talking, going back over a month ago, Ant, like, hey, we're in the playoffs. It's hard to fall out of that. And that was kind of what we all said too, and that is true usually.
And here's the thing where I will push back against what Russ is kind of going for here. Because just because they didn't trade Scott Laughton at the trade deadline does not mean they're not going to trade Scott Laughton before July 1st at the draft or the summer, whatever. I mean, it does not mean that. And so if they tried to make a push with Scott Laughton and it failed, and then they trade him in the offseason, and you still get what you would have gotten or what you think you would have gotten, are we going to be complaining then? Like, what the hell's the difference?
Well,
especially if you're now looking at getting a draft pick in 2025, which is a better draft than 2024. So at that point, I sit there and say, then guess what? Then the general manager did the right job. Now, if you don't move him or you get less than you think you would have gotten, then I think you could question it. Then I think that there'll be, you have every right to sit there and say, maybe not. Maybe they mishandled that one. Okay, fine. But to sit here and say today, right now, in the moment, they should have traded Scott Laughton at the deadline. I'm not ready to go there, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 months.
So, and I hear you, and I'm glad that we're having a respectful dialogue, Anthony. I think it's great.
Are you going to get the same? Are you going to get the same offer though for him?
That's exactly the point, Bundy. And I'm so glad you said. And I will say, I'm gonna add a little bit of context here. Scott Laughton before the trade deadline was not playing well, at all. Which is why there were so many people, I think, leading up to the deadline who are like, well, fuck, you maybe did turn down a first-round pick last offseason. Or maybe it was conditional to get to a first. But you definitely were offered a high pick for him in the offseason last year. And I think there was a little bit of activity around him last trade deadline as well. But I digress. He wasn't playing well going into the deadline, and there were questions about, all right, well, are you going to sell low on him, right? You came out of the deadline, and all of a sudden, he was like back. He was, and in fact, in a lot of games, they kind of swapped his minutes and the times of the game that he was playing with what Sean Couturier had been doing early in the season. And so you look at it and go, oh man, this is good. Like, okay, fine, you didn't make the move, but you get to the offseason, and if he continues that run of play, stands to reason you could get another good, offer for him. He has not looked good. I mean, there was about a 10-game stretch, I think, post-deadline where he looked really strong, right? But his play has fallen off again. And so I guess, Bundy, I think that is the real question here. It's very rare that a team gets 2 opportunities to potentially move a guy who, like, if we're being honest, Scott Laughton's not a top 6 player on a contending team. So, like, if you had the chance twice to make a move for a high pick, I don't know if you get a third crack at it.
Let me defend the other side of that. There was something more to Scotty Laughton than just like he plays well some nights. He's maybe not the player he was 5 years ago, but as Danny said in that press conference in Tampa, he unites guys. He brings players together in a certain way that and believe me, there is value for that, because right now there's something lacking. I mean, there's a complete disconnect all over the place, and this happened in the last 3 weeks. They weren't. The Flyers were not. I was just going to say, when the Flyers made it, I put that comment up about the team deserving a chance. And at that time, we felt the same way. Like, these guys have worked their balls off. Like, they deserve the fucking chance to get into the playoffs because they had the points. It wasn't like they had a 1-point lead. They were comfortably sitting in. And I think the one thing that no one could account for was this massive collapse after that 7-game stretch. They could not beat a team like Montreal or Columbus.
So here's what I'm going to say to you. Okay, Russ, last year, you didn't trade. They didn't trade him at the deadline for what we hear was, a very high draft pick. And you argue, well, why did they do that coming off of the season that he had? Then he has a down year this year. But even still, with that down year at the trade deadline, Danny Briere was still being offered those same kinds of draft picks, or that same kind of offer that he was offered a year earlier. Okay. So that value is there for the player. Going into this offseason, you're not just going to say, well, we look at the last 7 games of the season. And I say not including the 3 that are still coming, right? But let's look at the last 7 or 8 games. Scott Laughton has kind of reverted back. No scout, no general manager in this league is going to look at a small sample of 7 and 8 games and say, oh, well, his value was a first-round pick on March 8th. But by April 8th, he's no longer worth a first-round pick because he had 7 or 8 games where he kind of dropped off a little bit. That's not the case. Not only that, you now have a number of other teams that would potentially trade something for him. And I say that because I do know there were a couple teams that had kicked the tires on him that were not playoff contenders who were interested. Again, for the intangibles that Bundy was talking about. Now you go into an off season and you say, well, maybe those teams are more interested now. He's got a really team-friendly contract, right, for teams that might trade for him, and it's 1 less year that you're paying for. So now you only have 2 years left of a contract worth $3 million a year against your salary cap, okay, that you get a bottom 6 forward, okay, fine, but he's a leader in the locker room and brings everybody together, right? And there is value there. So it's like to me, I think you look at it and say, you can't take the fan perspective all the time. It's the same concept the same argument I made with Aaron Nola, right? For baseball. And I don't mean to go off on a baseball tangent here, but here's the thing. The value that the Phillies saw in him was that here's a pitcher that can throw 200 innings. And there's so few of them in baseball anymore. And then you look at around the league and aces are getting missing time because of injury. They're going to get Tommy John surgery. The Braves, the Guardians, a lot of teams are having these issues, but yet the Phillies have a guy that they locked up because there's an intangible value that's not just measured in the statistics that fans look at every day. And that's the one thing that I'm trying to point out. Scott Laughton has that value around the NHL.
Okay.
That's it. And it's not just him. It's not just him. We're arguing Scott Laughton, but there's several players who I don't think are going to be here next season.
Yeah, like I don't know if it's too early to start looking at like who's going to be moved, but like I do think it's now fair to have some serious conversations about guys that like you might not have wanted to have the conversation about a couple months ago. Like 2 months ago, we were talking about Travis Konechny.
Oh, he's playing hurt though.
Well, I know. Well, but
I can't criticize the guy with what he's playing through. I
am not criticizing the guy. Great guy. Friend of the show. Has been on the show before.
I can't criticize a player's performance when he's gutting something out like that.
Here's the problem, though. If he's not an act, there's this disconnect. Bundy can probably speak to this better than anyone because he's the one who played in the league. But sometimes a player needs to be protected from themselves. Sometimes they're not as helpful at 70% or 60% than them just being out of the lineup. Now, he has had games, and I do want to be clear, there have been games where Konechny has been really good. He's been part of a productive line, but he's not been himself. No. And so, like, gutting it out, by all means, it's great to a point, but when the return is significantly diminished, I don't know.
Yeah, but when you say it's diminished, Russ, when he's healthy, he's fine. That's the argument. You're not getting rid of Travis Konecny. Travis Konecny is going to be here for a long time. They're going to sign him to a contract in the summer. The guy you should be questioning is Joel Farabee, because that guy's been healthy this year and he disappeared. He disappeared when the going got tough. Joel Farabee wilted. That's a guy I would start looking at.
Yeah, I think he was the guy that Torts was talking about last week, where he said, "Well, we got to have a look at guys." These type
Torts
of moments.
Torts is live. Do we want to throw it to Torts?
It's up to you.
I might be able to spin this up real quick.
If you can get up, I guarantee it's not going to be a long presser.
All right, hold on. I'm going to try to.
He's going to do it in French tonight.
Why don't you do this, Russ?
I've got it right here. Hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
Let me see if I can get this pulled up. Sorry, guys.
His name is Jean.
What do you think kind of led to that happening? Is defensive zone breakdowns? Is
there are so many different things that happen in the game. Yeah.
I guess it's just the nature of hockey that bounces sometimes don't go your way, and it seems like everything isn't going this team's way right now, and they're just trying to fight through it as best they can.
Yeah, I know you can say that, but we made a lot of mistakes tonight. Turnovers, coverages, any part of the game, there were mistakes, and really, for the most part, it's uncharacteristic of the club. And even though when we've been going through the losing here, the last couple of games, Columbus and here, we've done some things that we haven't done for a lot of the year, and so you got to eat it, and we got to stay together and try to solve things. Whether it's enough time to do what we want to do to try to get in, I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about just being pros, trying to get some of our dignity back. And just playing the right way. I think that's the most important part that we've got to stay together with.
We were surprised to see all the players still out there stalled after the game. Is that your impressed?
I'm sorry?
We were surprised to see that all the players were still out there stalled, all dressed up.
Yeah, they need to answer the questions. Yeah, they need to answer the questions. It's a good group. No matter what happened tonight and no matter what we're going through, it's really been after I guess that 7-game segment of all those tough teams. We just haven't been right, but it's a good group of players, and I'm frustrated for them that we're kind of ending it this way and some of the things we're going through. But we've just got to lick our wounds and we got 3 more games to play, and I just think it's incumbent upon all of us to do it the right way. And try to finish the year the right way. Where it ends up, I don't know, but I just want us to play the proper way, and we'll get that from our players. It's a good group.
Did you see any positives specifically in the first period that you'd like to expand on?
Well, there's not a whole bunch of positive. I thought it's one of the tougher buildings to play in because it gets revved up. It's such a great building to play in. They score their first goal right away. And you say, man, but I thought we gathered ourselves there and actually didn't play a bad first period. But then when they score their second goal, we're running around a little bit, things just went the wrong way. A lot of unforced turnovers, just a lot of mistakes in our game that we're going to have.
Flyers lose this
Well,
one.
why
classic. Thanks to NBC Sports for the video, but
why stick with it? Like, why stick with it when you can
they
just
do
walk
it all
away?
the time. They do it not just for this sport. They do it for every sport. They just cut away.
I'll see when the team posts on Twitter.
So
but
ridiculous.
hey, I have a question. I know that there are a lot of people who think that we got overly critical because Torts decided to get on a soapbox about Ant. But I think we've always been very critical of coaches when they deserved it. This goes back to Alain Vigneault, to Mike Yeo, to Scott Gordon, to Dave Hackstall. If that guy shows up, maybe if the guy we just heard, I mean, he kind of sounds defeated, but maybe if that guy shows up 10 games ago, maybe if that guy doesn't bench the fucking captain, maybe if that guy doesn't do the silent treatment about
I think
Sandstrom, maybe if that guy actually takes some accountability, doesn't play the fucking family excuse, by the way, that he used a week ago. The reason he didn't meet with the media those 2 times is because of family. This is the same guy who has actively gone out and benched Travis Sanheim in front of his family, scratched them in front of his family, in front of Bobby Brink's family. Get the fuck out. If that guy shows up, maybe, just maybe, things don't fall apart the way they did. But he didn't. He did the shit that he always does, and this is why his teams collapse down the stretch the way that they do. This is, like, that guy, I don't know what that is. I don't know where that has been, but that doesn't sound like a guy who has an answer. That sounds like a guy who just, he's hopeful that he can figure, like, he has no answer.
He doesn't have an answer. He doesn't have an answer, and I will sit here and tell you that I do think that things changed with the scratching of Couturier, but I'm not going to sit here and completely blame the coach for everything. You can't completely blame the coach for everything. He's got stuff to blame him for.
He certainly has a hand.
Identify and say, "Hey, wrong buttons, push there, buddy." But there is a lot of players that are just collapsing on the ice. Their games fell apart.
It's like the fucking car in the race. I told you again, like last week, it didn't pit. It thought it had enough gas to get to the finish line, and it ran out of gas.
He deserves criticism, though, because
that's a coach. That's what I said. It's the pit boss, right? The pit boss makes the decision on what the car needs to do, especially inside the last 30 laps in any big race, right? It's the same thing, same concept. You got to manage that. And for some reason, whatever Anthony said, and I agree with you, and I think when you look around, there's a feeling that whatever went on with Coots was taken in by individuals in that room in different types of ways.
Yeah, I think they started playing scared in a lot of ways with their jobs, with their ice time, right? I think that was a gamble that was unnecessary, and it led to this. It led to this outcome. I do think there was something to be said about that. And so, Russ, with that criticism, I think it's very fair. It's a very fair criticism. I don't think it's you overly bashing the coach on that particular thing. But to sit there and say they all quit on the team or they all quit on the coach, this happens to him all the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't go there with this team because this team wasn't supposed to be in this conversation. If we go back, if you told me, and if I say this to both of you too, if we were sitting around on October the 1st and said to ourselves, on April 9th, we look at calendar, they're going to play in Montreal, and we're going to have to do an emergency podcast because they collapsed at the end of the season and lost a playoff spot. We would have been like, there's no way in hell this team's going to be in that spot. Just isn't going to happen. So like, it's easy to sit there in the moment and be upset, and everybody should be. I'm not telling anyone they shouldn't be upset with this game or with the fact that they've lost 8 straight games. You absolutely can be as a fan. Absolutely you can be. But at the same time, you have to sometimes take a step back and look at the perspective and say, would this team, any of us think that this team would be in this position for us to have this conversation tonight? And the answer to that is no. And you got to give the coach credit for getting them to this.
And we have done that though. We've given them credit. We've given the coach credit all year. We have not for some of the bullshit stuff that's gone on here with the show and all that other stupidity, but for the coaching job. I mean, up till 12 or 14 days ago, he was still in my top 3 for the Jack Adams. I mean, he elevated a team beyond what anyone thought they could. This might have been if John Tortorella didn't structure this well this year, that could have been the team that you had out there every single night with some other coach that didn't put in the effort and try to get the room together the way he did. But it's like we said it the first 5 games of the year. You could probably say it in every broadcast. It's really, really hard for this team to win hockey games. And it's going to be very difficult as they are constructed for them to win hockey games. And you know what? It's caught up to them. The water's kind of leveled itself out. Unfortunately, I hate to see all the good that the players have done this year get lost in this. But sadly, in the moment, it has. It has. It's the only thing I can think about is how bad these fucking losses were to these shit teams. And we don't look any better. We look way worse. We got smoked. We didn't just lose. We got smoked twice by Montreal. Some flukes in that game, goals called back, but still 4-1, I think. Columbus was just a disaster. Buffalo, the Flyers played unbelievable the first 2 periods, and they couldn't get a stop. That was a disappointing night for them. It really was. They played their balls off in the game they needed to, and it didn't work out. And then tonight, Columbus wheels off. They were deflated, and tonight was their last gasp. I mean, it really was. If you look at the standings and the way the games went tonight, so they're going to need a miracle. And this just ended really on a sour note. But I also encourage people to remember that there was a lot of good things done this year too. But again, it goes back to needing skill and talent. That's how you plow through these things. Guys with skill and talent, ultimately, it's great to have guys that block shots. It's great to have the camaraderie and the locker room stuff. But it comes down to what you do on the ice and how you perform ultimately. And Torts was right, and we knew it. I've known it. I played in the league a long time. The games are bigger, and they're bigger and richer the last 15 games of the year. They're like playoff games, and you got to be prepared for them. And the Flyers group this year, I was hoping that the first round would be, if there was an exit, that would be their learning experience. And unfortunately, the experience that they're going to remember is this one. And hopefully it leaves enough egg on guys' faces that they remember it and remember how bad a feeling this was, because it makes me sick watching it. I can't imagine sitting on the bench right now. And you know what? I've been part of these. I blame myself. I was on part of that Buffalo game. That 8-0 game, it was a disaster, and everybody that's played the pro game has been part of a game like this, except this has gone on in stretches at the absolute worst time. And like that playoff game against Buffalo, it was awful. It wasn't meant to be, but this has really been a very disappointing couple of weeks.
Russ, before you pull it up, you got something ready to go. I just wanted to ask you, do you want to hit? I know we had a few.
We have super chats. I want to get to them. I want to get to this other thing first.
All right.
When I look at I like to try to be as fair as I can. Okay. When it comes to coaching, the coaches that piss me off the most, and I've compared Torts to Doc Rivers before, the coaches that piss me off are the ones who take a lot of the credit when they win and deflect when they lose. And I don't think that's a very good way to go about it as a coach, especially if you preach accountability. Now, I mentioned that Torts' teams have had a propensity for kind of falling apart down the stretch. And there was somebody on Twitter who put a thread together a couple days ago. Now, obviously, the numbers are a little bit different now because the Flyers continue to lose. But I do want to pull this up because I think it's important to give some context, okay? So here's your timeline. This is from this year. February 9th, 2023 record with the Flyers and Torts. 22, 22, and 9. After that, they went 9, 16, and 4. This season, February 12th, 2024 record, 29, 19, and 6. Better. After 7, 12, and 5. That's obviously gotten worse. And you might say, hey, that's just the Philadelphia Flyers. But nay. If you go back to Columbus, the 2020 Columbus Blue Jackets team started 30, 16, and 9. Very similar to where the Flyers were this year. They went 3, 6, and 7 after that. 2021 started 13, 13, and 7. After that went 5, 12, and 5. I'm not saying that he's a coach that oversees a ton of collapses. What I am saying is that's at least a decent enough sample size from the last few years. We're not going back decades. We're just looking at the last few years that he has teams that he's able to push, maximize, get the most out of guys. But as we've said since the very first game of this year, you push and push and push, and guys are not capable, especially on a team that doesn't have the requisite talent. You push for so long, and eventually the wheels do fall off. And I think that's enough to say.
I guess the question is, what's the alternative? What's the alternative is the question. Like, I think when you go off of those stats, and that's fine, you're looking at 2 seasons of the stinky Columbus Blue Jackets and 2 seasons of the stinky Philadelphia Flyers. It's what you're looking at. You're not looking at his entire time in New York. You're not looking at his entire time in Tampa, where those teams had talent and they did not have those end of season collapses. So you have to ask yourself, is the solution to just basically say, let's not push them, but then we'll struggle more in the beginning of the season and hopefully we'll be better at the end? Or do you try and say, hey, let's get out to as good a start as we can, because it's hard to fall out of a playoff spot, even though this Flyers team has found a way to do it, right? But it's harder to fall out of a playoff spot than it is to climb into one. And so I think from that perspective, if you're looking at it again from the overall picture, I don't think he really had an alternative as a coach who's trying to win hockey games. Coaches are not trying to lose games. As much as people want to think that, the team should tank, coaches and players play every game and coach every game to win. They don't try to lose. So when you're in that mix and in that moment, You're looking at it and saying, what's my best chance to be winning come March and April? This is how we have to play now. I think he had the right read on that. It's just that it was not sustainable. And that's what we said all along, that you can't play this way for 82 games. They tried and they failed. And that's the reality of it. But it doesn't mean that it was necessarily the wrong way to go about it at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a marvelous job, to be honest with you, to be here what they are with that power play and with that ultimate full body skill set that wasn't apparent. They did some incredible things. They really did. But it's hard to do that. It's hard to sustain that. And on to New York.
Yeah. Well, so I guess
who lost again tonight to the Islanders, by the way. So.
Yeah, Islanders are pretty much in a good spot at this point now, right? Well, I think if things go the right way, the Rangers can clinch number 1 seed by beating the Flyers on Thursday. I think that's a possibility. I would have to look and see, but I think it's a possibility that can happen.
Yeah,
so
brutal.
You might get to the super chats.
Let's get to the super chats. Yeah. And we thank the wonderful people who send over super chats. You're not required to, but we certainly love and appreciate all of you who do. We hell with it. We love and appreciate all of you who check this show out on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and ring that little bell so you get notified whenever we do a show like this. We have a lot of stuff coming, by the way, in the summer. I think we're going to have some fun. We're going to do some stuff, so that'll be exciting. But we're going to finish the season strong. But DMako1 asks, could this collapse push for a change behind the bench? Now, before you jump in, Ant, there are 2 different ways that this could go. Some might think, does this mean they could fire Torts? I would say that hypothetical that's been out there for a while and was mentioned that we cited on this show a week or 2 ago about could Torts maybe just look to make that transition to the front office? Based on the way that this has happened, this collapse has happened. Again, he's not a young guy. Relative to like coaching, does he look at it and say, I don't want to do this shit again? Like, this is going to require a lot more than even I hoped it was going to. Is there a chance that this really could either push the team to make the move or push Torts to make the decision to move, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a conversation that's going to be had, and whether it actually comes to fruition will remain to be seen. I think a lot of it has to do with who the replacement would be. And I know everybody mentions Craig Berube. We've mentioned Craig Berube a couple of times on this show, and it certainly makes a lot of sense considering his ties to management and he lives in the area and all that good stuff, right? I mean, so it certainly makes sense from that perspective. But I look at a guy like Torts, and I think that if he were to move upstairs in some capacity, he might want to do it to give Brad Shaw his opportunity to be a head coach. Brad Shaw his name has been out there as a consideration for other teams as well. And so like that could be one of his things. He might say, hey, if we're doing this, I'm only willing to come out from behind the bench if it's Brad Shaw. And then it's up to Keith Jones and Danny Briere if that's the direction that they're willing to go in, right? I don't, maybe they look at it and say, hey, why don't we can give it 1 more year and then reassess. Maybe they say now's the time. You can't have an 8-game collapse at the end of the season. Just make the change. Or maybe they sit there and say, yeah, we'll give Bradshaw his chance. Yeah. Who knows? I think that.
By the way, we threw this up on the poll. If you're on YouTube, we put this poll up. Who should be the Flyers coach for 24-25? Tortorella, Shaw, Berube, whose name has come up a bunch, or other. I know there are people who are like, hey, if Carolina bombs out in the playoffs, could Rod Brind'Amour become available? Bundy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot of things that go into a team. This was a, don't kid yourself either. I mean, if the Flyers make the playoffs, there's probably $10 million in revenue, that come with that. That's no longer there. That's what you miss for not making the playoffs. So again, I don't know if that's on the radar. There's a lot of things I have to consider. There's a lot of stuff that the media has spewed this year in different ways. Maybe didn't have a stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes out about the coach. The biggest question I would have, and it doesn't matter necessarily what happens with behind the bench. Can you draw free agents here? That's my biggest question. Because I'm just be honest with you. There's guys out there that talk. There's players' meetings. There's guys that have played for Torts. There's guys that have liked them. There's a lot of guys that haven't. If there's a good free agent that comes out and you really like them, and there's other teams involved, that's going to be part of it. That's absolutely going to be part of it, because you can live with a mid-range guy that you know is going to be a fucking hard ass, and you deal with it in modern day. But you also know that there's coaches, and it's been there. He said it himself, where that is too much sometimes, and guys are like, you know what, fuck it, I'm not doing it. Especially a guy who's won a cup, he's going to go to another team that he thinks is going to have a chance too already, instead of dealing with that. So that's what I worry about. Is the biggest thing for me would be what do the eyes of a free agent look like when they look at the Flyers on July 1st?
That's fair. That's a totally fair question, totally fair critique. And I guess we would go back to, in a way, it almost feels like a postmortem of the season, and there are 3 games to go. But, you go back to when we first...
And they still have a shot.
And, well, they don't, though, but they don't. I mean, if we're being
they're
real,
only 2 points out. It's
Ant, I need you to calm down.
I'm just telling you that it's happened before, Russell. That's all.
I am merely pointing out that if the Flyers somehow... Listen, I'm going to admit something, right? We as people who are talking heads, who are tangentially affiliated as being media, we're not supposed to root for or against a team. We're supposed to be objective. I wanted the Flyers to make the playoffs because we have not gotten to cover a playoff team together, Ant. We've been doing the show for almost 6 years. No, 6 years now. Mm-hmm. We have not covered a playoff team. You were pretty much dead the last time the team made the playoffs when they had the bubble, because you were like, put in prone position to save your life with long COVID, right? In the hospital. We thought you were dead. Got the email. Ant's not going to, good chance he's going to make. Whole thing, all right? A little bit of PTSD there, Ant. A little bit. You don't remember it. I do. So here we are. And it's like, we've never gotten to cover a playoff team together. And we love Bundy. And we've never gotten to cover a playoff team with Bundy either. And we've had all these people who come up to us with the Press Row show. We've built this goofy little community of people who come up and they ask for intern Andrew's autograph. What a fucking weird group of people. And we love them. We love them so much. And I wanted these people who have suffered through years and years of horrific hockey to finally, at least in a year where there was no chance of making the playoffs, for them to make the playoffs and give those people just a taste of playoff hockey. I genuinely wanted it. And there is a very small part of me that is just pissed, not because there's the fan part of me that, I had to kill a few years ago to do this show, but because I feel bad for all the people who were getting excited about it, who actually did believe it was going to happen. I feel bad for those people.
We tried to warn them, though, Russ. Well, at least I did, and Bundy did. You were the one getting excited. You were the one that had that guy Ian sending us the clip of you saying they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs. Maybe this team's better than we thought. They're going to make the playoffs.
They ended up being better. They ended up being better.
They were better than we thought.
They
were better.
In fairness,
they were.
They
absolutely were. Yeah, but by the way, we did cover a playoff team.
Did we?
In the bubble.
What was the playoff? No, I said that was when you were almost dead.
No, that was before I was almost dead.
Was it?
Oh. Yeah, I was alive.
We couldn't go to the games.
No, but we still did shows.
Nah, that doesn't count.
We did post-game reaction podcasts of all those playoff games. Absolutely.
Bundy, Ant being almost dead was before your time, right?
Yeah, I heard he was almost dead. People told me, hey, remember that Anthony SanFilippo? I'm like, I fucking know Anthony. They're like, yeah, he's almost dead. I'm like, no shit, man.
Bundy,
that fucking COVID. But you know what? I found out he was a 2-time survivor of COVID.
So anyway, but we haven't gotten to cover a team in full. And again,
I know the
Press Row show, dude. Press Row show has been so much fun. It's been sort of a revelation, right? We get people who talk to their ticket people now to say we love what Snow the Goalie's done. We love the Press Row show. We know Joe Papel, who gave up his season tickets, went and bought tickets that are 6 rows off the ice behind the goal because we got him so excited for the season, right? I'm a little bit sad that there's a very good chance there.
I will tell you this as a journalist who's covered this team, it's always better to be somebody covering a winning team than covering a losing team. It's just always better. So we technically, quote unquote, root for teams to make the playoffs because it's good for us. It's good for journalism. Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course, if there's something juicy when things are going bad, do we kind of lean into that a little bit sometimes? I think we do. And that's because it's a good story, right? And it gets people talking and conversation. But the reality is, on the whole, for everybody, it's better if the team's a winning team.
I'll answer this last super and good points. Absolutely.
Sting Chameleon here says, Bundy, how long does it take to get over fatigue?
So fatigue, it generally happens like just as you get worn down over the year. But what happens in games like this, you don't really worry. You know you're tired, but you got to find that next gear. It's another level. You just dig in. It's like a playoff game when you're gassed and you're on fumes. You just dig in. And that's sometimes finding that, sometimes being a young guy and understanding the length of a season. But there's another gear in there that you don't know beyond what your body's able to tell you. And it usually comes with excitement of a game. You find your own momentum. So that's that answer.
Wow, we just had more super chats come in. All right, let's
we had
get
a third one though prior to those two, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm saying we're up to 5 now. Here's the third one. Scotty's Wild Adventures. I love that picture. I feel total eclipse of the heart. Best sums up my current state of mind. Can we expect Rocky Haircut Thompson on the coaching staff next year?
Well, that's a good question. I think it really kind of depends on if Torts is here or not. So for what that's worth, I do. I think that, and it still might be, even if he is here, there could be a change, but I don't know if you're going to sit there. I mean, what would that look like if after this season you kind of pinned it on the assistant coach, but not the head coach? Like, I think, like, I had a problem with,
just did it.
I was about to say, I had a problem with the way the Eagles handled it. Right. I do. Mm-hmm. I think that the Eagles mishandled it. They've blamed the assistants and kept the head coach in charge. You know, it's hard to do that unless there is something that is an outright disconnect with an assistant coach. It's hard to blame the assistants and not blame the head coach. I think that's a weak move when teams do that. So I would, is it possible? Sure. But I don't think that this management group will do that. I think that if they make a change, it will be all encompassing.
Rory wants a Ginla here with a super chat.
Well, I mean, he's considered one of the top prospects in the draft. I mean, but again, it's not a great draft, so we'll see. We'll see.
Can I address that really quickly, though? I know that we've been told that for over a year, and we don't do the scouting. The three of us, we're not watching. We are not watching film on these guys, right?
No.
Can I just throw out the theory here, though, that it's probably still better to get a high pick, even in what is perceived to be a bad draft, because it does give you a better chance to get the guy that your scouts do think is the best of the bunch, and perhaps you do end up with a guy that years from now you look back and say, wow, it was supposed to be a weak draft, and it ended up being a better one. So better to have like the 10th pick than to have like the 16th.
Of course, but the way I say it is this way, Russ. There are drafts that have generational talents, like last year. Then there are drafts that don't. And there's a belief that this year's draft doesn't really have that generational talent. Celebrini is probably, he's going to be the number one pick, and he's going to be a good player, but he's not looked at as a McDavid, as a Bedard, or even a Mishka for that matter, right? I mean, that's the difference, right? So you're still going to get a really good player, but then eventually when you have a draft like this, there comes a group of players that kind of fit the same mold, and they go between, depending on what year the draft is, maybe you say it's between picks 10 and 18. Those 8 players are all relatively close, and you hope you get the right one depending on where you pick, right? So, I mean, of course you could sit there and say, well, yeah, we'd love to have our guy, but your guy might be at 18, right? Your guy might not, the guy your scouts like might not be, and like I look at a guy like the kid Yzerman, who last year was being compared to Celebrini. Which one of them is going to be number 1 overall? Which one's going to be number 1 overall? And now you're looking at the kid Yzerman, who's sliding down in a lot of people's draft lists, right? So it's hard to determine these kids at 15, 16 years old. Oh, they're going to be superstars in the NHL. Yeah, the ones that are at that top level, they're going to be. You're able to tell those guys, but the next group it's a little bit more of a, you're throwing a dart and hoping you get it right.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. Hey, really quick, people who are watching on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that like button. It does help us get to more Flyers fans out there. We have 2 more super chats here, and then I think we're going to wrap the show. Vineet Singh, thank you for the super chat. Vineet says, love the show. Not sure I can take any more Flyers. Vineet has been riding with us all year. Yeah. Question, how do they go toe-to-toe with the best during the gauntlet and then get blown out for 2 weeks?
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? That's a good question. But, they poured so much into that gauntlet. And then when they came out the other side, I think that they realized that pretty quickly in the games that those teams were still competing. And there's not a big difference in talent a lot of times. You get some skill guys on other teams. But they hit the wall, and they just could not find their footing after that. I think they got 1 win after that where it was a good win. Like, they came back. And you know what else really sunk them too, guys? Amazingly. When I look at this team, another one that I think added to this, that Islander game at home, they get that unbelievable goal. You look at the bench, they look like they won the cup, right? The moment the Islanders scored in that overtime game, this team hasn't been the same team. That goal just sucked the life right out of it because it happened so quick, so fast. And for some reason, they haven't been the same team. And that can happen. You just get deflated as a group, and that's what happened.
Andrew Fawcett says, thank you for the amazing community. I don't live in Philly anymore, and this keeps me connected.
Thanks,
Andrew, thank you for being.
Thanks, Andrew.
And it's, you know what, we have a lot of great people who we pop up here a lot, and a big part of it is because, we love the people who check in every game, and we love the people who find us after a game or find us on a random interview or whatever we do. So a big thank you. We got another one here, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. Arguably the biggest story of the offseason. Who's the starting goalie next season? Do they go after another goalie?
I think it's a good question to ask who the starting goalie is going to be. I don't think that they're going to go after a goalie in free agency or trade. I don't see it because I think they recognize that they're not ready for that. They're not ready to go get that guy. Not only that, if you go back to when we first had Jonesy on, after we announced our partnership with the team, and he gave, I thought was a really, and we played it and talked about it several times, a really interesting comment where he said that he's more interested in paying for a number 1 defenseman than he is for a number 1 goalie. And that's just his approach. And he mentioned Bobrovsky's contract in Florida. And look, Florida was in the Stanley Cup final last year. They're one of the best teams in hockey this year. And he said at the time, I bet if they had a chance to not have that contract, they would. Right. I mean, and that's the reality of it. I mean, it's that you don't want to overspend for a goalie in this league. Just teams don't like doing that anymore. So I don't necessarily think could they potentially go out and get a backup? Maybe, I don't know. That's a possibility. It's like a low number, but they have so many goalies over here now. They still believe in Urson. They still believe in Fedotov. They brought Kolosov over. They signed Bjarnason to his ELC. I think that they look at having a bunch of good young goalies in house, and let's see which one of them potentially develops into a number 1 goalie at the NHL level.
All right, last super chat here. Nick Steyer sets the nightly record here. $10 super chat. Thank you, Nick. Says you could see Tort's garbage this year in the way he went at Ant. Great coach, wrong time for this team. Never got invested because he was going to burn the guys out.
I still think that there was value to him as a coach at that time. I think that there's players that are going to be really good players in this league courtesy of playing for him for 2 years. I look at a guy like Cam York. I think Cam York is a player who's going to be a better player in this league because he played for John Tortorella for 2 years.
I agree. You've seen the hardest it's going to get.
Right.
And you're gonna once you learn the game a little bit more as experience the league, that will be a benefit to you, no doubt.
Yeah, I think that there are players that will, and they'll say it down the road, much in the way that a guy like we've talked to Patrick Sharp on this show, and he said that he didn't really like Hitch didn't like him, but he said at the time he thought it was ridiculous how he was being treated. But then as he got older in his career and he realized there were things that I learned by playing under Ken Hitchcock that made me a much better player in my career. So he recognized that, right? So I think that, you're going to find a number of guys on this roster who are going to probably say similar things about John Tortorella when they're veterans down the line.
Oliver also checks in here, one of our our press row. I don't what we call Oliver a press row groupie, right?
Yeah, sure.
Oliver's always up there.
They're always up there, yeah.
Chatting it up. If they lose on the 13th, birthday will be ruined. They better learn how to play by the time I see you all next.
Well, we'll be sure to say happy birthday to Oliver.
100%.
Yeah.
All right, so a big thank you to everybody.
I had to cue it there.
You fucking guys were light. Fuck me, you look like the Ice Capades, for fuck's sake.
It was only
I used to look back. I'm like, I used to turn back and be like, you know what? Thank God you're not in the fucking Ice Capades.
I still think of all the things that have happened this year, getting that one soundbite out of Bundy made it all worth it.
Absolutely did.
If nothing else, that's the one. That's the one that we can always go back to and feel good about. By the way, I don't know if you got. Well, I still have this clipped. I'm not gonna play the whole thing, but this is just to give people an idea.
Hey, what, Bundy? I know that you're committed to playing in the game. What if Hitch is behind the bench?
No, he ain't going to be here.
There's not going to be a lot of room then. Next question.
I bet you Hitch likes buffalo chicken pizza.
Hey, could someone bring me out some of those buffalo wings and some pizza?
We were talking about.
It's so good here in Philly. I love eating pizza and wings.
We were talking about pizza pregame, Bundy, and Russ was trying to ask me if what kind of
I want pepperoni and sausage on my pizza. Why is this not here?
Russ was asking me.
You look like you're in the Ice Capades. Get me the pizza.
Russ was asking if you like chicken.
All right, so I'm just gonna cut it there. I feel like we needed a little bit of levity to end the show because it's been so low. Anyway, a big thank you to everybody who's checked in. And I'm gonna let you answer this one from Greg. Tailgate on the 13th, question mark.
So we are not going to do the tailgate on the 13th. The Flyers were kind enough to set up a number of things for us in the parking lot for that day to do the tailgate. There were some other things that got in the way of us being able to do it. And so it's not going to happen on the 13th. We have agreed with the Flyers, talking with them to just punt it to the beginning of next season, only because it got to a point there's a lot of stuff going on down at Wells Fargo. I don't want to kind of dive into anything that's kind of political that's going on down there, but there's some stuff happening outside the arena, and it became a little bit of a challenge for us as well to kind of get food in at a last minute kind of scenario, right? So with all that stuff happening, we just decided it would probably be better to just, and they're willing to do it beginning of next season. It's just we have to just wait. I think it was the right time to say let's just pause here for.
The other big thing was we talked in the beginning of the season. We were like, look, we're going to let people know well in advance when it is.
Yeah.
Because we have all these people who have like sent us messages on the streams and on Twitter and on Facebook that are like, hey, I'm going to fly in from Tennessee to come to the tailgate. And it got to a point where it was like we were looking at it about a week out when we were finally, getting some details together with the team. And it just became like, are we doing a disservice to the people who wanted to come into town for it? And ultimately, it's like we'd rather do this the right way at the start of next season and be able to give people a date that, if you choose to come in from out of town, you can say for sure, this is the date, and we have everything kind of ironed out and allows you to travel.
That's the way to go.
We do have 2 home games, so come and say hi to us. We are there.
Yep, 100%.
Are we going to say anything about?
Nope.
No.
I don't know if it'll still be a thing after this episode.
Come on. We're not going to wait till Saturday. What are we doing with that?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll figure it out.
All right.
We'll figure it out.
Go. Good night.
Yeah, it's time. It's time to go.
Have a great night, everybody. See ya.
Everybody have a great night. Thank you for checking in. We will be back at some point later this week, and we'll do some press row shows here for those final 2 games. God help us. We'll see. Maybe they'll pull off a miracle. Maybe not. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Make sure you like the video, share the video, subscribe on your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. And please share the show to other Flyers fans in your life. We love and appreciate all of you. Have a great rest of your night. The Flyers may suck, but you, the listeners and viewers of Snow the Goalie, we
love
suck.
you.
Good night, everyone.